Hey everyone, if you're watching this, hit that like button right now because I need your honest thoughts after you hear what happened to me. I still can't believe I'm saying this out loud. Waking up next to someone I should never have touched. My body aching in ways that felt both heavenly and completely wrong. A moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about myself and left me questioning every choice since. Before any of this, my life was painfully ordinary. I was stuck in a dead-end job with bills piling up, coming home to an empty apartment every night, feeling invisible and unfulfilled. Just scrolling through my phone wondering if this was really all there was. No excitement, no passion, just the same gray routine day after day. The kind of existence where the highlight was remembering to water the one sad plant on my windsow. This was fine. That stability mattered more than sparks, but deep down I felt the ache of something missing. Like a hunger I couldn't name. Then he moved into the apartment right next door. At first it was just polite nods in the hallway, the kind of neighbor you barely notice. But every morning I'd hear his door close at the same time as mine, and that faint woody cologne he wore would linger in the elevator, making me pause for just a second longer than I should. The scent wrapped around me like warm smoke, pulling at something low in my stomach. I'd step out onto the street, still carrying it on my coat, telling myself it was nothing, just air, but my pulse would quicken anyway. One rainy Tuesday I fumbled with my keys outside my door, groceries slipping from my arms, and he appeared from nowhere, catching a bag before it hit the floor. Our fingers brushed for less than a heartbeat. His skin was warmer than I expected, steady against the chill of the hallway. "Let me help," he said, voice low and easy, like he'd been waiting for an excuse. I nodded, throat tight, as he carried everything inside. The space between us felt smaller than it should, his breath mixing with the rain on his jacket. I forgot how to breathe normally. He set the bags down, glanced at me once, and left with a quiet anytime. The door clicked shut, but the heat from that single touch stayed on my hand for hours. I stood there in my tiny kitchen, heart hammering against my ribs, wondering why one innocent moment felt like stepping too close to a flame. He was just a neighbor, nothing more. Yet that night I caught myself pressing my fingers to the spot where his had been, replaying the way his cologne had drifted closer when he leaned in. I told myself to stop, that this was silly, that I was reading too much into politeness. But the next morning I found myself lingering by my door a little longer, listening for the sound of his footsteps. It happened again a few days later. That same woody scent filling the small space. We stood side by side, shoulders almost touching, the air thick with unspoken things. I could feel the warmth radiating from him through his sleeve. My mind raced with warnings: this is nothing, don't be ridiculous. But my body leaned in just a fraction, drawn by some invisible gravity I couldn't fight. When the doors opened on our floor, he held them for me, his eyes meeting mine for a beat too long. "Have a good day," he murmured, and the low rumble of his voice sent a shiver I tried to hide. Back in my apartment, I leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Why did his nearness make everything feel electric? I was supposed to be focused on surviving, on paying rent, on keeping my head down, not noticing how the hallway light caught the line of his jaw, how his presence made the silence between us hum. I poured a glass of water and stared at my reflection, ashamed of the flush on my cheeks. This couldn't be happening, not to me. Not with someone so close, so real, so wrong to even think about. Yet the next time our paths crossed, when he offered to hold the building door as I struggled with bags again, I didn't pull away as quickly. His hand hovered near mine, not quite touching, but close enough that I felt the pull, the almost. My breath caught. Inside my head the voices split, one screaming to keep distance, the other whispering just a little closer. I smiled, thanked him softly, and walked away with my heart racing like I'd run miles. The ache settled deeper, a quiet craving I didn't want to name. And then last night, I heard his door open just as I stepped into the hall. He paused, looking at me under the dim light, that cologne drifting between us again like a secret. He said my name once, soft, and for a second everything stopped. The air felt too heavy, too warm. I should have kept walking. I should have said goodnight and closed my door, but I didn't. I stood there, pulse thundering, waiting for whatever came next. I started noticing him in the laundry room first, the hum of the machines filling the air while we waited for our loads. He'd fold his shirts with careful hands, and I'd steal glances at the way his sleeves rolled up, revealing the faint lines of veins along his forearms. Our eyes would meet over the folding table, and he'd smile, that quiet kind that made the fluorescent lights feel softer. He'd ask, voice low enough to feel like it was meant only for me. I'd nod, heart skipping, telling myself it was just polite conversation between neighbors. Each time, the space between the dryers seemed to shrink, his presence pulling at something deep inside me I didn't want to name. Then came the trash nights, those awkward encounters by the bins under the dim outdoor lights. One evening the bag tore in my hands, spilling everything across the pavement, and he was there before I could even curse. He knelt down beside me, gathering the scattered cans and wrappers, his shoulder brushing mine as we reached for the same item. The warmth of his skin lingered through the thin fabric of his shirt, a heat that traveled straight to my chest. "Here, let me help," he murmured, and for a second our fingers hovered so close I could almost feel the electricity crackling in the narrow gap. I pulled back too quickly, laughing it off as nothing, but inside my mind spun this as harmless, just a kind neighbor. Stop overthinking the way his scent mixed with the cool night air. Our paths kept crossing like that, small moments stacking up until they felt heavier than they should. Shared laundry chats turned into longer pauses, him asking about my job, me mentioning the leaky faucet I couldn't fix. He'd listen with that steady gaze, the kind that made me forget the boredom of my own routine. One afternoon in the hallway, he offered to take a look at it, tools in hand, and we stood in my cramped bathroom while he worked. The air grew thick with the faint smell of his aftershave, woody and warm, wrapping around me as I handed him a wrench. Our arms nearly touched when he reached up, and I held my breath, the silence between us humming with something unspoken. I told myself to step away, that this was crossing into territory I had no right to enter, yet my feet stayed rooted, craving the nearness even as guilt whispered warnings in my ear. The balcony evening changed everything in the quietest way. He'd invited me over for a glass of that cheap red wine he kept on hand, saying the building's WI if I was acting up again, and maybe we could figure it out together. We sat there under the string lights, knees accidentally pressing together under the small table, the fabric of our jeans doing nothing to dull the spark that shot through me. I shifted away, murmuring an apology, but the contact had already lit a slow burn low in my stomach. His laugh was soft when he refilled my glass, the sound vibrating through the cool evening air, and I found myself leaning in despite every alarm ringing in my head. I forgot how to form words properly, the wind doing little to mask the way my pulse quickened at his closeness. Later that night, alone in my bed, I replayed it all, the way his breath had carried hints of the rain from earlier, how the almost touch under the table had left my skin tingling hours afterward. This shouldn't feel like this, I thought, staring at the ceiling. He's married. I'm tangled in my own settled life that feels more like a cage than comfort. Yet the memory pulled at me, a gravity I couldn't escape no matter how hard I tried to push it down. The hesitation grew sharper with every encounter, my mind a battlefield of should-s and can'ts. I'd lie awake after seeing him in the stairwell, his cologne clinging faintly to my sweater from when we'd passed too closely. "This is dangerous," I'd whisper to the empty room, fists clenched against the sheets. My stable days felt colorless now, the routine with my partner a distant echo compared to the alive feeling his nearness stirred. But then guilt would crash into a frat. What kind of person lets a simple brush of hands ignite this kind of hunger? I was better than stolen glances and lingering thoughts. I had responsibilities, a life built on quiet predictability. Still, the next day I'd catch myself slowing my steps in the hallway, hoping for another chance meeting, the ache deepening into something that felt like drowning in slow motion. Each time I told myself to stop, the pull won out. His voice echoing in my thoughts, the warmth of his proximity like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. I knew it was wrong, knew the lines blurring between us could ruin everything steady in my world, but the craving settled in my bones, quiet and insistent. And just when I thought I could lock it away, the knock came late one evening, soft but unmistakable. I opened the door to find him standing there, rain damp hair and that familiar scent drifting in with the hallway draft. His eyes met mine, hesitant yet charged, and he said something about needing to borrow a charger. But the way he lingered in the doorway made the air between us feel alive again, heavy with all the unsaid things from before. My hand tightened on the frame, heart hammering as I stepped aside to let him in, every instinct screaming this was the moment I should have turned away. But I didn't. The door clicked shut behind him, and in that suspended breath, I wondered if this time the almost would finally break. The power outage hit just after midnight, his knock pulling me from the edge of sleep. I answered in the dim glow of my phone flashlight, and there he was, silhouette framed by the emergency lights in the hall, shoulders tense under his thin shirt. "Mind if I waited out here?" he asked, voice low like he already knew the answer. We ended up on the couch, some old movie flickering across the screen, the kind with rain-slicked streets and unspoken regrets. His arm rested along the back cushion, fingers barely skimming my shoulder through the fabric of my sweater, each accidental graze sending a current that made my breath hitch in my throat. I told myself it was nothing, just two neighbors sharing space in the dark. But when we both reached for the same glass of water on the coffee table, our lips brushed in the softest. He's not free, I'm not either, yet my body stayed rooted, the almost touch blooming into an ache that spread slow and deep. He pulled back first, murmuring an apology that sounded anything but sorry, his eyes searching mine in the blue light of the TV. The air between us thickened, heavy with the scent of his soap mixed with the faint damp from outside, a shared umbrella in the sudden downpour, our sides pressed close under the shelter of it, his heat bleeding through layers until my skin felt branded. Or the evening he offered to fix that loose shelf in my kitchen, standing so near I could count the faint lines at the corners of his eyes when he smiled. Every time my mind warred with itself, "Stop this now, before the gravity pulls you under." But the hunger one, quiet and relentless, like thirst you can't name until it's too late. The benefits crept in so subtly, I barely noticed at first. He'd slip me a small gift here and there, nothing extravagant, just a warm scarf on a cold morning or that fancy coffee he knew I liked. In return, the loneliness that had settled in my bones like winter fog lifted whenever he was near. His laugh, low and easy, made the gray days feel electric, alive in a way my settled routine had long forgotten. I catch myself touching the spot on my arm where his hand had rested a moment too long, the silk-like memory of it anchoring me through the empty hours. "This is just comfort," I'd whisper to the mirror, temporary and harmless. But the way it filled the hollow places made the ordinary world blur at the edges. Yet with every rush came the deeper pull, the obsession unfurling like vines in the dark. I'd find myself pausing by the door at the sound of familiar footsteps on the stairs, pulse quickening before I even saw him. That one awkward dance in his kitchen to an old song on the radio replayed in my head on loop, the clumsy sway of our bodies, his hand steady at my waist, sending tremors I couldn't shake. The moral voices grew louder, "You know better. This will burn everything down," but they drowned under the tide of craving. Each just one more glance turning into nights where sleep evaded me, my thoughts circling back to him like a storm you watch approach. I tried to lock it away, really I did. Told myself the next time would be the last, that the lines we kept blurring were warnings I should heed. But then he'd appear again, in some innocent moment that felt scripted by fate, and the surrender would whisper closer. The tension coiled tighter with every shared breath, every near miss that left me trembling hours later, wondering how much longer I could pretend this hunger wasn't consuming me whole. And then, one rain-lashed evening, as we stood inches apart in the narrow hallway after another accidental meeting, his fingers hovering so close to mine I could feel the pull of gravity between them. He whispered my name in a way that shattered the last fragile barrier in my chest. My resolve cracked right there, the ache surging forward like a wave I no longer wanted to fight, and in that frozen heartbeat I realized the obsession had already won. Then came the night everything shattered. Rain hammered the windows like accusations we couldn't outrun, and we were tangled in the dim glow of his living room, bodies drawn so close the space between us felt stolen. His breath brushed my temple, warm and dragged, carrying the faint trace of whiskey and that cologne that always made my thoughts scatter. The old vinyl hummed low in the background, a slow song neither of us had chosen but both felt in our bones. His phone lit up on the table, vibrating once, twice. We both froze. The screen showed her name, his wife, brightened unforgiving. Before he could silence it, his thumb slipped, and her voice filled the room on speaker, sharp with worry. "Honey, are you okay? It's late. I tried the office line earlier." The words sliced through everything. His scent still clung to my skin, heavy and intimate, mixing with the damp chill seeping from outside. In that frozen second, reality crashed down like the storm outside. This wasn't some harmless pull anymore. It was fracturing lives. His, hers, and the fragile pieces of my Nide pretended were still whole. My chest tightened until breathing hurt, the guilt flooding in so fast it drowned the warmth we'd been chasing. He reached for the phone, murmuring something steady into it, but his hand trembled against mine where it had been resting. I pulled back slowly, the absence of his heat leaving a hollow ache that spread through me like frost. The song kept playing, mocking us with its gentle rhythm, while her voice lingered in the air even after he hung up. We sat there in the heavy silence, inches apart yet suddenly miles away, the almost touch of earlier now feeling like evidence of a crime. In the aftermath, shaking with tears I couldn't hold back, I made the choice. My voice came out small, cracked at the edges. We can't. This has to stop. Even as I said it, every part of me ached to lean in again, to chase that gravity that had pulled us under so quietly. But I stood, legs unsteady, the room spinning with the weight of what we'd almost become. Walking away that night felt like tearing out something vital from my chest, leaving an emptiness that echoed louder than any rain. I'd crossed a line I could never step back over, and the guilt tangled with the lingering pull left me raw, broken in ways I hadn't known were possible. He didn't beg, didn't argue, just watched me with eyes that held the same storm I felt inside. I know, he whispered, the words heavy with everything unsaid. That was the worst part. No dramatic fight, no final embrace that could have made it easier to hate him. Just quiet surrender as I gathered my coat, the fabric still carrying traces of his warmth from earlier. The door clicked shut behind me, soft as a secret ending, and the hallway swallowed me whole. Now I sit here in the quiet hours past midnight, staring at the wall where his shadow used to fall across mine, wondering if I did the right thing by ending it, or if I'm just a coward for not fighting for that feeling that made everything else fade. The ache hasn't left. It simmers low, reminding me how alive I felt in those stolen moments, even as the shame wraps tighter. Part of me still listens for footsteps on the stairs, heart skipping at nothing, caught between relief and a haunting what if that won't let go. You tell me, family, was I right to walk away, or should I have held on despite the wreckage we were causing? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did the pull feel worth the cost? Or was the guilt always going to win? Smash that like if this hit you somewhere deep. Subscribe so you don't miss the raw details of how the emptiness settled in after, and let me know if you want the even more intense version of those final nights. I need to hear from you. Tell me I'm not alone in this lingering hunger that refuses to die. The rain outside my window never quite sounds the same now.